Welcome back to another episode of Unblock Your BS podcast, right? Where we're unblocking your bullshit, your belief systems, what have you. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about slow burn relationships versus love bombing. I recently put out a post and it got tens of thousands of views, a ton of comments, and with 150 characters in a comment, there's only so much that I can respond to. And I thought this would be a great topic to deep dive on the podcast. So we're going to get into that today. We're going to talk about attachment styles. What's the difference between love bombing and slow burn? Why is one maybe preferred over the other? Just for context, this is a judgment-free zone. You are entitled to your opinion. It's your opinion. What do I care? I come at this with there is no right or wrong, good or bad in life. It's all discretionary, meaning that you get to choose what is right, wrong, best, not best for you. So if anything kind of happens to come up for you, come at it from a place of curiosity. And again, I'm not saying one is right or wrong or good or bad in this entire conversation. You get to decide what works best for you. So there's a lot of themes in the comments that I pulled for today's episode that we're going to go into. We're going to get into what the difference is between slow burning and why that might be beneficial for some attachment styles versus love bombing and what that's usually indicating in somebody's nervous system. We're going to talk through like just some people in the comments who were like, why can't you just let it be? We're going to talk about why I'm educating on this and why a lot of people need to and want to understand these patterns in dating. We're going to talk about people who were very anti slow burn and very vocal about that. We're going to talk about society and dating norms, right? That came up. We're going to talk about how healthy relationships can sometimes feel confusing or boring. And then we'll get into a little bit of Q&A, just some questions that I'm going to have some follow-up posts to, but I thought would be great to address on the episode. So let's get into it. So first, I think we need to kind of clarify some terms that I'll be using if you've never heard of love bombing or slow burn relationships or anxious attachment, avoidant attachment, fearful avoidant attachment, disorganized attachment, just basically attachment styles. So you may have different definitions. That's totally fine. I'm going to share with you what my definitions are so we can have a generally accepted usage of these terms for the purposes of this podcast. So love bombing is really a manipulation tactic, but it's not that people are really aware that they're doing it as manipulation. And I often see manipulation as not necessarily a bad thing. Technically, what I do could be considered manipulation. I'm shifting your perspective to see it from a different way. And I'm using certain neurolinguistic tools to be able to do that. Is my intention bad? No, my intention is actually very good. If you want to take it as bad, sure, that can be perceived as manipulation. But usually those that love bomb aren't necessarily aware that they're doing it, right? They're not necessarily doing it to be hurtful or malicious. They're doing it to try and control an outcome. Or they're just not even aware of they're doing it and they're just impulsively reacting to the hormones that are dumping into their body. So love bombing is when one person is showering another person with almost excessive affection, attention, compliments, grand gestures, grand statements very, very early on in the relationship. We're talking within the first couple months, if not the first couple weeks, and sometimes even the first couple minutes. That way that they can like establish this fantasy kind of future and get somebody emotionally bought into that so that they can feel like there's stability and security. This is somewhat traditional of the avoidant attachment style. Avoidants are those who, when they feel really activated, like their nervous system starts to feel like somebody's getting too close to them, they avoid it. They either run away, their fight or flight response, usually a flight response, kicks in, and they shut down emotionally because they have not felt safe with closeness based on their childhood. All of our attachment styles are created in childhood, mainly with our caregivers or our parents, right? And so that then gets reflected in our adult relationships if we don't work to heal that. So what the avoidants tend to do with the love bombing is they feel very intensely for you, right? And that's what's exciting about it until over time that's not sustainable. And then the vulnerability and like your ability to hurt them, the longer it goes on, starts to rear its ugly head. And that's when they pull back. So it can be a very intense experience where it then pulls back. And then the anxious attachment, which means that when somebody pulls away, you desire closeness. So you want to go towards the person where you're feeling really strong emotions. You want to almost manipulate them into being closer with you. It's very common to have dismissive avoidance and anxious attachments be partners together because it gives that push pull. You're both attracted to each other in that way, except it's very toxic and not a healthy partnership because your nervous systems are both dysregulated. Neither one of you are feeling safe in that relationship. So it's kind of signaled by love bombing is signaled by intense early affection, a manipulation tactic, although they may not be present and like aware and conscious that that's what they're doing. There usually becomes a push away, whether they're devaluing you, whether they're, taking back what they said, they're twisting it, whatever. There's a pullback phase, and there's usually a decline or, a period where they kind of their emotions come down, and either they get back into the relationship or they're done with the relationship and they shut down, leaving the person who was love bombed very confused because all of these amazing, wonderful things were said and you bought into that emotional future. And now, very quickly, it's done and over with. So I brought up this topic of slow burn. I didn't make up the term, but I was bringing it up to be like for somebody who, like me, I lean towards anxious. I'm actually, based on the test I took, a fearful avoidant, or they also call it disorganized attachment, where I experience both anxious attachment and avoidant attachment. Yay, me. I love that. But I actually understand both sides fairly well. And so when you have this anxious attachment and this desire for closeness, what's really happening during the love bombing phase is that our brains are trying to make logic of the chemical soup that's being dumped into our body by somebody new. Okay, so in my experience with my situationship, the main one I've had in my life, he love bombed the fuck out of me, and I had no idea what it was. I think we matched on a dating app. I want to say around Wednesday-ish, maybe a Tuesday, and we had great messaging back and forth. He was very complimentary to like how I was handling like not being able to text him all day and that I was working, but I was consistent and following up with him. And I think by Thursday, we my mom was coming into town and I said, we can meet up next week because he had asked me when I could meet up. And so I said next week. And he texted me Friday saying he didn't want to wait till next week, that he was really excited about me and wanted to meet me this weekend. So was there a way that I could come over? He had his kids that weekend, so we had to like meet on his porch and hang out on his porch so that, while his kids were sleeping. So I was like, sure, this guy's like super excited and yeah, I can go visit him on Friday night. So I did that. And it was great. I mean, it was a unusual first date, right? And then we did that again on Saturday night, and I could tell by his text, he was getting really excited. He started saying things within those first 2 days that were projecting a future relationship. Like, I think he said, "By Monday, I had been looking for you my whole life, and I thought you didn't exist, and here you are." Like, what? Now looking back on it, I'm like, "That's fucking crazy." But then I was so bought into this love at first sight, or when you know, and all of that bullshit you're fed as a kid of like, what romance is supposed to be, and this is how it's supposed to feel. So I leaned into that, and he was very pursuant of me, which I loved. He was very intentional about making the effort and making plans and going above and beyond to make sure that I felt great and amazing. And it was interesting because by Thursday of the following week, we had our first kind of little disagreement where I was sharing vulnerably. I was sharing about, I was a year out of my divorce, and my ex husband and I were having a little bit of a co parenting challenges, to say the least. And I was sharing this with him, which was very vulnerable for me because, I'd only known him a week and was sharing this information. And he started being really dismissive of my viewpoint, didn't really want to talk about it, was actually mean at one point in something he said. Maybe it was the way I perceived it, but it felt mean. It didn't feel supportive. And in my brain, there was a moment where I was like, don't let this motherfucker you've only known for a week discredit your experience right now. And so we ended the conversation. We were talking on the phone, and I was like, I actually need to take a second. And so I was actually really proud of myself for pulling back in that, to really pause and go, what did I get myself into? But the attachment and the fantasy based thinking had already planted a seed that I wanted to explore. So in that moment, my logic side came in to say, this person is actually may not be compatible with you. But I had already bought into all of the fantasy thinking that the last week and all of that love bombing had created this picture in my head and I didn't want to lose that. And it felt really good when I was getting that. And here I am now, logic going, what did he just say to me? Like that was actually really mean and rude. And so we kind of with the love bombing, what's happening is you're getting a bunch of hormones dumped into your body, right? Dopamine, oxytocin, all the feel good hormones. And so attachment is starting to form, right? Because you're trying to build a future with somebody that you don't know yet, right? After a week, I mean, I knew his first and his last name. I knew how many kids he had. I kind of knew his job and I knew I liked the way that he talked about me. But that's it. But already I'm like projecting a future with him and my emotions are getting involved in that fantasy based future. I was also looking for signs of like, this is so unique. This is such a special chemistry. We've never felt this way about anybody else, that kind of thinking. And look, he was in his 40s. I was in my late 30s. Like, we dated people, but you want to think that you're significant and you're special. And when somebody is feeding you that, you want to believe them. So then after that, we started sleeping together really early on. And that I also recognized increased my attachment to him and my feelings for him. Uh, Almost in a false sense, right? In that, again, I was getting locked in emotionally to him before I knew him and how compatible we were and if this was a good partner for me. So fast forward to like a month later and we blew up in epic fashion. His avoidance reared its ugly head. He pushed me away pretty significantly. Um he was having a really anxious couple of weeks and me being who I am, a life coach was trying to help him through that. And he kept pushing me away and he kept pushing me away. And I didn't know at the time attachment styles and that his nervous system needed a break and all this stuff. I learned all that in hindsight. But I kept trying to go closer to him and like, we should work on this together. You have a partner now. Like, let's do this together. And he kept pushing me away of like, no, I just need some space. I need some time. And then it imploded within 6 weeks. So here I was like oblivious to love bombing and the emotions that were involved at that, thinking that this was somebody who was so special and so unique and loved me right off the bat and all this shit. And it just went to shit within 6 weeks. Why? Because we didn't know each other. So that has kind of been my experience of love bombing and what sent me on a journey to understand attachment styles and love bombing and slow burns and what my nervous system is telling me in a relationship dynamic because I was oblivious to the role my nervous system plays in attachment and dating and relationships and partnerships. Okay. So a slow burn is pretty much the antithesis of love bombing, but it's not a situationship. I think that needs to be very clear. A slow burn is really more of a organically but healthy progression of feelings and attachment and time and connection over a longer period of time. Now, there is no set timeline, right? It's not like, well, it's 6 weeks is a slow burn, it's 6 months. If you've been in a slow burn and it's not fully a relationship for like a year, that's probably a little too slow. But it's going to be the key indicator is how your nervous system feels along the way and how you're able to regulate your emotions and communicate tough feelings, hard feelings, scared feelings, sad feelings with that person over time. And that you get to experience multi facets of them over time rather than just jumping in and hoping that it works out, right? Like just going into it blind and we'll figure it out. It is being intentional about the relationship and the connection that you're having. And so a slow burn is it builds over time. Okay. And the key indicator is that your nervous system feels safe. Okay. That doesn't mean you're not going to get triggered. It doesn't mean that you're not going to have heavy feelings, but that you feel safe enough to be able to communicate that with your partner and that it is well received and that it's not dismissed and that, the connection builds and grows over time. So it's a gradual development. It's got a stronger potential for a stronger foundation for the relationship turning into something more serious. Kind of almost like you're building a friendship to then becoming lovers, although you can be intentional that it's romantic right off the bat. But if you're jumping into bed with somebody right off the bat, say within the first week or two, your hormonal mix starts to change, right? And so you may get into more love bombing or you may be emotionally attached before your compatibility is really sussed out. So no judgment either way, but it's just something to be mindful of and run your own tests and your own experiments. So let's get into some of the questions and topics that come up because for me, I was stating on this video that I desire a slow burn. I actually feel way more comfortable sharing vulnerably when romantic relationships are not necessarily on the table yet, or I'm not trying to rush into a relationship. And it took me, a season of being single and not dating to really understand when I feel comfortable to be vulnerable. Because I want to be vulnerable fairly upfront and like establish a really strong connection up front. It's hard for me to do that when somebody's love bombing me because then I'm getting attached to a future, but I don't know if they actually love me or accept me or know me as I am. And so you're almost kind of like, do I share this? Do I not share this? Is it too soon? Can I go to them with that information? That seems confusing to me. Okay. So some people were just like, let it be, stop over analyzing. And I get it. Right. I get how sometimes you just need to live life and not overthink it, as people want to say. But I also responded back with, well, you're underthinking it, right? Like, this is why we don't have a good formula for relationships in this current day and age, right? So maybe we need to be more self aware and more emotionally intelligent to understand the dynamics at play so we can actually create the relationships we want. Because most people are not self aware. Most people are getting into relationships for companionship, not compatibility, not for future. And then we have really high divorce rates and we have unmet expectations. We have abuse. We have self abandonment, like a whole toxic stew of people using relationships to feel better about themselves, but they end up feeling worse, as opposed to you feeling secure and safe and healthy in yourself. And you find somebody that also helps you feel safe and secure in partnership. Right. So we can do all the healing work we want on our own, but you can't heal relationship wounds in solitude. You can only heal relationship wounds in the context of a relationship. Hence why we're trying to create a self-aware army so there's more self-aware people who can create safe spaces for relationships. All right. So one person said slow burn or love bombing. If it's going to work, it's going to work. Uh well, statistically speaking, that would be incorrect. Right? Like, let it be. It is what it is. It's just I mean, sure, go ahead and try that. How's that working for you? And then another person said, I think we have all been burned. We look way too much into it and the proper way, quote unquote. How about just flow and surrender? I am all for flow and surrender. When you have a healthy nervous system and you understand how your nervous system works, and most people don't. So the flow and surrender is actually what got me into pretty toxic situations that were detrimental to my mental health. So my curiosity in this was trying to understand myself better. That's more exciting to me than anything else, is my own personal growth and discovery journey, and recognizing I also want somebody who wants to understand themselves better, and where partnership can actually be a beautiful mirror for healing and growth. So all about the flow and surrender if you're in a good spot and you can spot the people that are trying to project their stuff onto you and you can kind of know what your red flags are. And then another person said slow burn versus love bombing. Damn, if we got to the point where a relationship has to be normalized, quote unquote, then we've truly lost. It has to be unique. It has to be aligning vibes, not rules. Well, isn't that ironic that he's saying not rules, but also then he's saying it has to be unique and it has to be about aligning vibes? Like, aren't those rules? So some of that is just, I get it. Like, I get that there's a lot of conversations around attachment, but I think to some extent, other than social media gives you easier access to the stuff, we're trying to solve a problem as a society, which is mainly failing relationships and people projecting trauma and being hurtful towards other people that they say that they love. The system that we have is not set up for successful partnership. It's just not, right? Like, and if we're all trying to go towards marriage, marriage has a 50+% divorce rate. And then how many of those that are still married are miserable and unhappy and not in healthy relationships? And so at least if you're listening to this, I know you have a curiosity to understand yourself better in the context of your relationship with others. Otherwise, why are you here? Uh, so, some of that is just like, why are you even commenting? But thanks for the engagement. There were some people who were very anti slow burn, which I thought was interesting because that kind of indicates to me that they have completely they have just never understood the emotions that are involved with a relationship. So one guy said, but if we don't say all these lovey dovey things, then women think we're not feeling they're not feeling desired and claim there's no connection potential. It's why I stopped dating mostly. Too frustrating. When we start to make these generalizations around women this or men that, you got to recognize your responsibility in that. The women you've attracted and you've allowed access to you, that may be the case, in which case you're the common denominator who's participating and co signing on that pattern of events happening. So is it women or is it what you're drawing in from women and the types of women that you're drawing in? Because the lovey-dovey, this one fascinated me because he said, if we don't say all these lovey-dovey things, then women think they're not feeling desired. So what I look at in that is, oh, so you're just saying the lovey-dovey things so that your partner feels desired, not because you actually mean them. So isn't that manipulation, which is kind of the default status quo of love bombing, is the manipulation side of it, as opposed to a genuine expression of how you're feeling. And if you are, I'm just going to label the word insecure. People can get triggered by it, but I'm just going to say if you're that insecure that you feel like you have to control the outcome of dating someone and you have to act a certain way to get them to like you are self abandoning right off the bat and it's being insecure. You are not secure in who you are, that you are worthy and deserving of being loved as you are, that you have to perform in a certain way to get someone to like you. Right? So I get why that person stopped dating because now all of a sudden he's having to wear a different mask depending on the girl and depending on the mood and try and manipulate the situation to get the outcome he wants. But that didn't work because he's not being authentically himself and you can't sustain that for long periods of time. Right? So if you desire a long term partnership, yes, we kind of put our best foot forward, but look at how much you're actually not being authentic, right? That you're trying to control an outcome. You're trying to manipulate a situation or get somebody to feel a certain way about you when you're not being authentic to yourself. You're trying to perform. You can't sustain that forever. I remember the guy I dated right out of my marriage. We were together for about 6 months, and he was not emotionally intelligent. He really struggled to talk about feelings, although he tried, and I will give him that he tried to. Um, but I remember when we broke up, he was like, "I'll go to therapy, like I'll talk about feelings more and all this stuff." And I'm like, "No, because now you're only doing it to appease me, not because you genuinely see the value in it. So you're going to default back to who you are and who you choose to be, but you're trying to do this as a manipulation tactic to get me back." Right. And again, I don't mean that as like a bad thing and it's wrong. He just, that was the strategy he was subconsciously trying to use, was like, I'll do anything to get her back. I'll go to therapy. I'll do all the things you want me to do. And it's like, whoa, 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 whoa. If you don't inherently see the value in it, then don't do it for me. Do it for you because you see the value in it. But now that you're losing me, now you want to change? That's not sustainable because you're going to go right back to who you want to be, which is somebody who doesn't want to talk about these things. A-okay with me. Totally fine. Go do you. But I'm not going to participate in it. You don't get access to me because we're not compatible. So, yeah. Another person said, I don't understand this. I know right away if I'm interested in someone. To me, it has to be infatuation that turns into endearing love. Otherwise, just stay friends or associates. Then he followed up and said, I can logic anyone out of my life. My forever person needs to defy that logic. I truly don't understand the slow burn. And my one question back to this person, and if you're listening, thank you so much for like sticking with me in the conversation. I said, okay, how's that working for you? And he said, not very well. I was like, well, maybe it's time to understand. And I said, look, infatuation turning into endearing love, the infatuation piece is your nervous system being dysregulated. That spike in your nervous system is your nervous system really saying, you're not safe. But if we have attachment styles that are quote unquote unhealthy, then we familiarize that feeling and equate it to love. So I'll give an example. Let's say in childhood, you had a parent that was kind of hot and cold with you, right? And so I'm trying to think of like my example with my dad. My dad was not super emotionally open or available. I remember one time I was following him in the garage. I was probably 5 years old and I went to go give him a hug and a kiss. And he said, daddies and daughters don't kiss on the lips. And that was when I kind of created the belief that I wasn't inherently lovable as I was. And then I can kind of look back at how my life unfolded, and I started kind of turning to achievement based worth. My worth was around me achieving and being successful and whatever dad deemed as valuable, right? So money, wealth, success, that's how my dad saw the world. So I tried to become that to earn dad's love because I was rejected in the garage at 5. Now, I didn't know that all that was happening. I didn't understand how beliefs work and when the belief was created until I did inner child work after my divorce. So, what that created in me, in my attachment with men as I grew up, was trying to earn love by being a people pleaser. So, who would I go for? I would go for the hurt puppies who needed fixing. And if my love could fix you, that would then mean I was worthy and deserving of love. Or if I out earned you, or if I took charge of everything, if I stressed myself out enough, if I became everything you wanted, then that would make me worthy and deserving of love. Well, that's not super sustainable because that requires me to self abandon. And that then requires your body to get disease, get stress, get anxiety, gain weight, have some coping skills for handling your anxiety and your stress that are not very healthy. And so we can look at attachment styles coming from childhood. So if you are used to a push pull with your parents, right? Or you had a parent who was abusive or absent or had high expectations or didn't communicate well or didn't want to talk about feelings, or you witnessed things as a kid that you couldn't talk about with your parents, we take all of that nervous system, I don't know, adaptation, and we take it into adulthood and then we apply it to our adult relationships. So if your nervous system is used to chasing after love, trying to get mommy or daddy's approval, trying to get their attention, if they're always distracted, if they're always telling you they don't have enough time or they're stressed with work, and you kind of take and internalize, I need to be quiet or I need to comply or I need to please dad because otherwise everybody gets hurt. You take that into who you are drawn to and attracted to in adulthood because your internal nervous system has identified this feeling equals love. Ruh-roh. That's how that works. So if you aren't liking how your adult relationships are going and it's not a pleasant experience for you and you don't feel safe, it's likely because your attachment style from childhood is fucked up. And you can heal that. That is totally healable. It's not easy to heal, but it does require to go back and do some inner child work, which I do with clients all the time. And we heal it at the root where the belief was created. And then we start to build in skills and tools to help your nervous system to release that trauma that's stuck in the body, to release those beliefs that are creating stress and anxiety in the body. And then we have tools in the moment to communicate our needs when we are exposed to a trigger so that they become less over time, and finding a safe partner who will create and hold space for you to heal. Sounds easy, right? It may not be easy, but it is totally possible. Okay. So that infatuation piece, that firework, that spark, that passion, whatever you want to call it, is a dysregulated nervous system. Now, it's not saying that's anything inherently bad, but if you're looking for your nervous system to go from spark and chemistry into long form attachment, that spark and chemistry is going to go away. It's not sustainable over long periods of time because your body exhausts the chemicals and the hormones that are creating that sensation in your body, right? And as we get more into stable relationships, other hormones take over where we have long form attachment hormones as opposed to that attraction chemistry piece, right? And it's hard to get back to that. So it's kind of, they call it the honeymoon phase, right? Because you're just infatuated with that person. But over time, those chemicals fade and long term attachment goes into place, and the nuance, the newness of that person goes away because you've been with them for a long period of time. There's less guessing of, ooh, does he like me? Does he not like me? Ooh, did he touch my hand? Did he not? Ooh, is he going to kiss? Is he going to make out with me in the parking lot? Right? Like all that goes away. So if you want infatuation to turn into love, it's going to take some time for that to set into place. And if you are only drawn to or you equate love to that spike in your nervous system, you're going to have a really hard time getting to the attachment phase where you have long form attachment, long term attachment, where you're in a relationship for several years, if not several decades, because you're going to equate this feeling of excitement and spark and chemistry and fireworks as love, and you're going to think something's wrong with your relationship when it naturally progresses out of that phase and into a long-term relationship where safety, security, and being known is what's at play. All right. And then one person said dating is ruined. We just can't tell somebody we like them because everybody is so traumatized and they want to put a label on every behavior. Exhausting. Well, aren't you just a rosy bowl of sunshine? Uh, Fair. If you want to believe that way, if you want to have that perspective, please stay off of dating. Please don't piss in the dating pool with that kind of attitude. I get it. And maybe there's a way that you're approaching dating if that's your belief around it. And you can change how you show up in dating so that you don't have that experience. If you don't like dating, you're the common denominator, right? If you keep dating the same types of people or that you're labeling it across all dating and all women or all men, you're the common denominator. I don't know. There's a book called The Four Agreements. I think we talk about it in another episode, where it's taking 100% responsibility 100% of the time for your life. And it's taking that radical responsibility. That's where you start to get your power back. That's where you can start to have different outcomes. Okay. So let's get into some other questions. I mean, it was funny because seriously, the amount of generalizations of like, well, men would never, no men want to go in a slow burn and no woman would handle a slow burn. It's like, okay, who's right or wrong, right? Is it men that's the problem? It's women the problem? No, it's you. And then there's this kind of theme about healthy being confusing and even boring. And that's been a cool concept for me to explore personally because I've done the love bombing thing and I don't want to do that again. And I got into almost a very similar situationship from the first one about 6, 7 months later. And I even called it the man's name, we'll call him John. I said, this is just John 2.0. Like I could recognize when I was in it, the love bombing phase, the self abandonment I was doing, and then how after about 4 to 5 weeks, things started imploding. I got tired and fed up with the behavior and ended it. And so after that, and then the John 1.0 kind of came back in and we went through a very similar cycle. And I really self abandoned in that because I thought, okay, for sure he's coming back into my life for a specific reason. And once that imploded, I recognized I was participating in patterns again that I thought I had healed, right? You can heal as much as you want in solitude. But if you're trying to heal relationship trauma and triggers, it can only be done in the context of a relationship. And I recognized I was not choosing safe partners for me. I was choosing the same partner over and over. So there must be a lesson I'm supposed to learn in this that I haven't learned yet. So I took a pause on dating. I said, I am going to work on understanding men, right? Understanding where I was being drawn to unhealthy men and starting to have healthy men come into my life in a friendship capacity for me to practice vulnerability and what my nervous system feels like in a safe friendship. Because ultimately, again, when you're getting past that passion, chemistry, honeymoon phase, you have a friendship, hopefully a best friend, like somebody that knows you really well, that you enjoy spending time with, that you want to share life with, right? You can do that in friendship too, right? There's something that makes it different between partnership and romantic partnership and friendship, but I needed to test out what worked for me in the compatibility part and testing out healthy friendships. And so I've been doing that the last 6 months, and I have really good quality men who I've kind of learned to understand and how they communicate and how they can show up for me as friends without there being a romantic component in that. And that has been a beautiful opportunity for me to experience what I would consider kind of slow burns, but without the intentionality of it turning into something romantic. So that's been my own experiment. And now I feel like I've had enough time alone. I've had enough time practicing male relationships in a friendship capacity that I'm ready to start dipping my toe back in the dating pool to test if I'm ready, right? Not that I'm like, okay, I'm looking for the one. Let's go out there and find him. Where is he? I am looking at my nervous system feels really calm. It feels really good. I enjoy my life as it is. I enjoy being alone. I enjoy my company. I love, my gym and spending time with my kids. And there I believe there's a man out there that can add value to my life and me to his. And let's put ourselves out there and see if I go back into the patterns of behavior that I was in the last 2 years, right? Where I'm choosing basically dismissive avoidance. I'm trying to fix them. I'm trying to heal them. Have I learned enough about myself in friendships with men that will then make me better prepared to be a great partner and friend to a man in a romantic sense, and then start to just add in the layers of the romantic side that makes it a little bit more than friends. So we'll see. I'll keep you posted on that. Some other questions. What signifies a slow burn? We talked about that. How long does it take a slow burn before it turns something definite? So this is where I want to make a distinction between a slow burn and a situationship. So a situationship to me is this, that there's two people on two very different pages of what they're trying to create, right? If you and your potential partner, one wants a relationship, the other one doesn't. One's dating for the intention of it turning to a relationship, the other one doesn't know. That's a situationship. You're not in alignment with what you're trying to create. If both of you know you don't want a relationship and you're just having fun, do you? That's not a situationship. That's a very clear terms like friends with benefits, whatever you want to call it. Have fun. Okay. But the situationship is usually there's people that are misaligned on what they're trying to create or what they want as the outcome of this situation. So a slow burn is more developing friendship and chemistry and attraction and partnership over time, and a situation, and there's no specific timeline for that. Right. And I think that's where we start to get into a problem, because the next question I got was, at what number during the slow month, what number of months during the slow burn do you just date one person? What date do you want to start saying these things? And I actually asked this question, I think, on one of the other podcast episodes, where it was like, at what point is it appropriate to start being vulnerable and start talking about the future? There's no right or wrong. Right. And there's different paces. What's most important is your nervous system, your partner's nervous system, and for you guys to establish that you're heading in the same direction, AKA compatibility. Right. And so if your nervous system is feeling good and it wants to start planning future stuff fairly early on, great. We're not talking about like you're getting married future stuff, but like let's say let's see, it's January. And let's say, spring break is in March and you don't have your kids and you thought it might be cool to plan a trip. Maybe a little bit aggressive. Maybe start with a weekend away. Sure, why not? Test it out. You can kind of gauge where they're at. Right. If they feel uncomfortable with that, you should know how openly you guys communicate together when you're misaligned, right? Like, ooh, I don't know, it might be a little early for a trip. That feels a little intense. We just started dating. Cool. Totally understood. I get it, right? I just thought it'd be a cool thing to do. Thought I'd put it out there. Totally fine if we're not ready for that. I appreciate that. Rather than taking it as rejection, they don't want you, da 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 da. Okay. So a slow burn to me builds over time. There's no timeline to it. I would say that, at some point you're going to want to have the vulnerable, honest conversation of where are we at? Not necessarily like, are you my boyfriend, whatever, but being on the same page with whatever that looks like. And if you don't feel comfortable having that conversation, I think that's a pretty good indicator your nervous system doesn't feel safe, right? If you're struggling with the person you're dating, I would hope, right, in a logical sense, that they wouldn't want you struggling because you're not clear on where they're at, right? If you're not clear on where they're at and you ask for clarity and they don't give it to you, that says it all, right? They don't actually want you to be clear, or maybe they're not clear. Okay. Behavior is a language. So I am under the belief that you shouldn't be confused with where you're at with a partner, right? Even if they need time, if they need space, as long as they're communicating that and they are being open and honest about where they're at, then you can make decisions for your life based on where they're at. Okay. Um, so one person said, oh, the slow burn sounds appealing, but what actually defines that? We kind of talked about that today. He said, most of my dating experiences have been love bombing. My current situation just hit its 1 month since we started talking or dating. We had our first kiss last Sunday and haven't moved further than that. We see each other maybe once or twice a week and chat throughout the day, but not constantly. I'm not going to lie, I'm an anxious avoidant, and this feels more natural, and I'm feeling more secure than I have in the past. That to me, that last part is all he needs to know, right? As long as his partner is also feeling that way. When we're early on, I think that instant gratification of social media and our phones and the dopamine hits, kind of starts to make it a little bit confusing of what is a healthy pace. And again, healthy pace is going to be discretionary for each individual. You and your partner are going to have to figure out what that is for you. But if you are seeing each other 1 to 2 times a week, great. If you're seeing each other every day and you just met, a little intense, right? You're nervous. You need to like not give up your life for this person quite yet. You want to build a life together over time. And when we are, and that may be a sense of identity, right? When I was ready to dive in, into the relationship with the situationship and just become whatever he needed me to be, it was self-abandoning and it was me undervaluing my life and what I had spent time creating as a single mom and the things that I valued because I just wanted to get his affection, his attention. I wanted that dopamine hit. And now I recognize I don't want to find someone where I have to give up the things that matter to me. I want to co create what this looks like for both of us. So, as I kind of wrap up this episode, I hope that your biggest takeaway is looking at, do I trust my nervous system as it is? Do I feel like my nervous system can tell the difference between healthy attachment for me and not healthy attachment for me? Not based on what it looks like for somebody else, your own experience of it, because you got to live your life in your own body. Okay. If you don't know what healthy attachment looks like in your nervous system, that would be something to explore. Love breathwork for being able to understand what calm is in your nervous system and as a tool to be able to handle when your nervous system ramps up. Okay, so I have a 5-minute breathwork download. That is a very quick version of breathwork to calm your emotions down fairly quickly. If you're looking to heal and discharge long seated emotions, or you're having recurring anxiety and stress and whatever, then a full breathwork session that's a 60-minute session, 10 out of 10 recommend that. It's like 10 years of therapy. It's amazing. But that 5-minute breath work that you can go download, I'll put the link in the show notes, is a great tool for a very quick way to regulate your emotions when you're feeling stressed or triggered, or you don't know if your attachment style is like self-sabotaging, or you want to run away, or you're, getting anxious, you want to get close. It's a great tool to help you regulate your nervous system so that you can then decide logically what it is that you want out of this situation and being able to advocate for yourself and communicate your wants and needs out of this partnership. If you feel like your nervous system is pretty healthy, that you feel like you've done some healing work and you're ready to try attachment, you're ready to try dating, look for patterns. People are just patterns. And that's why as a life coach, I can see the patterns. There's not that many different wounds. There's a lot of different ways that behaviors can express, but they all are the same patterns, right? Patterns, attachment styles are patterns. Anxious attachment has a certain set of behaviors and patterns. Avoidance have a certain set of behaviors and patterns. That's how we're able to label them, right? And get an understanding of you kind of fall more into these patterns. So when you're out in the dating world, right? Whether you're on apps, whether you're, out in the real world, whether you're at a pickleball tournament, whatever, look for patterns. You will find patterns that don't work for you, right? That trigger you to go into your attachment style, that feel love bomby, that feel like red flags, that make you feel nervous and excited, but then like sad and scared the next day. And then you can find also the patterns of what does work for you, like consistency, right? Like communication, like fun and play and intimacy and connection and vulnerability and whatever. You can look for the patterns of what work for you and what don't work for you. And the more you start to lean into dating people with patterns that align with what works with you, the more fun dating will be, the more encouraged you'll be that you're getting closer and closer to finding somebody who is a great partner for you, if that's what you choose. All right, that's all I have for you today. Woo, that was a deep dive. If you guys want to engage with me on social media, I'm on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube with Unblock Your BS. I'd love to have your comments in there. And then also in the show notes, I'll put in there if you want to be on the podcast to get some coaching or submit a question for me to answer on an upcoming episode. We'll go ahead and link that in the show notes. Until next time, have a good one.